Good morning and welcome to Funky Rainbow. So delighted as always to see many people joining us at a bazaar whose theme we've been living with for almost 1.5 years now. So, what I'd say is that welcome to Funky Rainbow's Book Bazaar on the pandemic. And this is I'd call it a hopeful kind of Saturday because when we started to curate books on this theme, we found that, writers had, created so many titles for readers, young and old, perhaps some written with the pandemic in mind and some, written earlier, but that are relevant to the theme today. And it was lovely to discover this clutch of books that, we think helps open conversations with children, that allays their fears, that explains the completely changed world, and offers hope for all of us, children and adults, that we are going to overcome for sure. We know, it's a theme. As I said, we've been living with this theme for over 1.5 years now, and we can see, I mean, the impact of the pandemic with every passing month, the impact that it has had on all the children in our lives, on us as adults, on the way we interact with each other. So we felt, I mean, we could have done a bazaar of books on the pandemic, much earlier, but I think waiting for a whole year has given us access to so many more books. It's also given us the lens to look at our own children's books with newer eyes and see how they are relevant to the theme of the pandemic that we are discussing today. And of course, all the books that we've curated are not necessarily about COVID-19 or about the present pandemic, but just even simple things like washing your hands, like being thankful to our frontline workers who have really helped us battle the pandemic, who have helped us battle the pandemic despite the odds. And hence this is an eclectic mix, and I really hope you enjoy the books that we have put out for you today. I want to tell my friends on Instagram, one, thank you for joining us at the Book Bazaar. It's always a pleasure to see people joining us on Instagram, on YouTube, and on Facebook. But for my friends on Instagram, we are not able to broadcast the interview with our guest for the day on Instagram, and you will need to move either to Funky Rainbow's YouTube channel or to our Facebook page to catch the conversation with a wonderful physiologist, Dr. Mario Vaz. And I think that's going to be a scintillating conversation on the history of, on pandemics past and present, and how they have impacted us and the way forward. We usually at Funky Rainbow have people from the Indian children's literature space. I mean, writers, illustrators, editors as guests. And it's once in a while that we get people from other spaces. And Dr. Mario Vaz, with whom we had worked 2 years ago, is absolutely an expert on the history of medicine. So I promise you a really scintillating conversation. And, I'm keeping fingers crossed, hoping that one will go viral, quote unquote. We have, of course, always, as always, the books are up on our site, www.funkyrainbow.com. You need to click on the tab that says Book Bazaar, and there will be a drop-down menu with season 1 and season 2. The season 2, link will lead you into all the bazaars we've done in season 2, including this one on the pandemic, and all the books that we're featuring, today as part of our bazaar are in that link. yeah, we are able to talk typically about 14, 15 books in the course of the bazaar for children of all ages, starting from newborns going up to young adults, and occasionally a book for adults as well. And but there are lots more that are in our collection that would be relevant to this theme. So do browse through that collection and see if any of these books interest you. If they do, please do consider buying them from Funky Rainbow. We do have a discount voucher which is up on our website, and you can apply it when you check out and buy the books that you want. I mean, COVID-19, I really, the words to describe the pandemic, it has absolutely, to say that it has absolutely changed our world would really be an understatement. I mean, in little over a year, or perhaps a year and a half, since the virus emerged in India, it has completely upended our lives. I mean, our lives are just not what we imagine, what it was pre-COVID, really. And it has completely changed the way we live, the way we learn, the way we work. In fact, Funky Rainbow's Book Bazaar is absolutely the result of COVID-19 only. We are in reality a traveling children's bookshop. We have a big little book truck, and we go here, there, everywhere within the city of Bangalore, where we are based, but also to different cities in the country, taking Indian children's books and their creators and introducing them to children in exciting ways. But come the pandemic in March 2020, the wheels of our book truck simply just came to a grinding halt. And when we slowly started to get a sense of what was happening and how things have really changed, that's when we came up with the idea of this online book show called the Book Bazaar, where we're chatting with so many of you who are watching us, on our social media channels, and introducing and recommending books on different themes. We've done over 45 bazaars now across the last year, and it has absolutely been an exhilarating journey to meet so many of you, even if it's across a computer, to meet and get to know so many of you, and to see your interest in Indian children's books. So that is, absolutely one of the results of COVID-19. We don't, do our pop-ups that much anymore. We're secretly hoping, like I'm sure many of you are, that we will go back to pre-COVID times, but I don't know if the new normal is here to stay. But we keep fingers crossed, and we always hope that in the times of, greatest crises and the greatest challenges, that all of us come together and rise above them. So pandemics, I mean, so once and especially, when the impact of the pandemic has been so high on children, I mean, in subtle ways, in unseen ways, right? I mean, for them to make a sense of this pandemic now, they don't go to school. Most of, I mean, they're all doing school online. I mean, you can't go out and play with your friends often, and your family members don't come and visit so easily. And though these are bewildering changes for children, they are for adults as well. And what can we do? What can we do to help them make sense of this new world and this new reality? Books, as always, have the answers to many questions. Sometimes they are the best ways to have frank and fearless conversations with our children, and also helping allay their fears, to tell them that, everything is not, everything that you knew before has not gone away. We're all still there together in it. We still love each other. We still do things that we used to do pre-pandemic. Maybe the manner of doing them has changed, and we truly do hope that the books in this bazaar help you have these conversations. If your children are ready for it, have these conversations with your kids. I mean, we all know disease and illness have plagued humanity since the earliest days. In fact, I have some stats that I got last week, where the Black Death of 14th century may have killed, it's estimated that it may have killed up to 200 million people. Smallpox, they say that in the 20th century, I mean, and that's as close as the 20th century, that it may have killed maybe 300 million people across the globe. The 1918 influenza pandemic, they say the numbers surpass the toll that World War One took. The number of people that we lost to a World War One are far, far lesser than what we actually lost to the 1918 plague. And even as recently as the early 1980s, HIV, it's a pandemic that's still with us. It still lacks a vaccine. And they say that there's an estimated 32 million people who are infected with HIV AIDS, with more people getting added in every day. So pandemics are actually not new to us. I mean, we are like just jolted by the fact that this has happened to us. But over time, the pandemic, I mean, many pandemics have raged. And the message that we want to send out to you, as will our guest today, who's an expert on the history of medicines and pandemics past and present, is that we have overcome and we will. That is the message that we want to leave all of you with. The bazaar, it's not a bazaar that wants to instill fear. It just wants you to see that there are lessons that we can learn from our history and which we are using today, and to overcome the COVID-19 pandemic. I can see, as always, many friends saying good morning to us. Anita Satyajit saying an exciting one awaits. Rimjim Priyadarshini Tandan saying wonderful, I can't wait for the recommendations. Mutama saying I cannot imagine us being in the office ever, especially during the weekends. I cannot imagine us not being in the office ever, especially during the weekends. And Divya Menon and Avyukt and Ameya Nair saying good morning to everybody. Anita saying beautiful message, much necessary to keep hearing this. Indeed it is. We should not let our spirits sink. We need to let them soar. I'm going to start off with a clutch of recommendations for all of you today. And like I said, we have books for the youngest readers. These themes are not to be kept away from the youngest children. I mean, I often think of children who are 4 and 5 and may have gone to preschool, but are suddenly just stuck at home. How do we have books for them? Yes, indeed we do. And I'm beginning with a lovely one that came not so long ago into our collection, called The Germ Academy. It's such a fun book, really, written by Ria Malhotra Mukhtiar and illustrated by Shahina Zaveri, published by HarperCollins. It's such a fun book. And every time I've read it, I found like some wonderful references to different things that, strike a chord with me. But what is this about? It's about the dirtiest, grimiest, smelliest corner of the earth, where there live a group of germs that were up to no good. And you can see, it's a simple picture book with very little text and lots of illustrations. Text is pretty large, so really even our youngest readers can read it. And you can see this awful Germ Academy right here, in the smelliest, grimiest corner of the world. Now, what were they doing? They were evil masterminds, and they were training to be the germiest that they could be. And you know what? You can see this lovely map. In fact, when I was looking through this book 2 days ago, I realized that the map, which is actually a map of our world, mentions so many germs that we are familiar with: H1N1, cholera, AIDS, Ebola, dengue, SARS. And it's all done in such funny ways. Look at all those viruses. They've got names to them. And also the different countries where some of these pandemics emerged from. And this Germ Academy getting ready for the art of war. Of course, what are they warring? I mean, they are every day, they are rugdoed. They are like put through the ringer at the germ gym, because they've got to work harder. They've got to get better. They've got to be stronger. They've got to be faster. and you can see mean trainers just training these viruses and germs to be their germiest best. What is their mission? Aha, their mission is to wreak havoc upon the world. And guess who is the meanest, grimiest, strongest, one of them all? It's Covey, the virus who has now been sent on a mission of world domination. What happens? Do they succeed in their mission? And and the lovely references, you can see one of these pages, where the headmaster of the school says, your mission, said headmaster Grot, should you choose to accept. And for many of us adults, and perhaps for some older kids, those are the Mission Impossible lines, right? Every single time Tom Cruise has to embark on a mission, he has this notice, or like this conversation, the self-destructing message that comes, that says your mission, should you choose to accept, is to conquer the world. But the world is, the world is stunned initially. But we have our superheroes too. And I'm just going to give you a slight clue on who our superheroes are, and nothing more about this lovely little book for our youngest readers. Welcome, the Soap Squad. What fun this book is, really. You got to be part of this, the adventures of this bottled brigade, and open a conversation with children about this disease and what we have and can do to get the better of it. This one published by HarperCollins, priced at 299 rupees, and like I said, available at a special discounted price if you apply the discount voucher when you check out. We would recommend this for 4+-year-olds, maybe even 3+-year-olds, depending on the reading levels. I can say Muttama is saying, may the pop-up times come back to us soon. Yes, indeed. We really want to pop up here, there, everywhere. Preeti Ramchandran saying, great theme to share the realities of life early on with the little ones. Thanks for the innovative topic picks week on week, from here, there, everywhere. Thank you so much to you and Gohan for watching us week after week and inspiring us to come up with these themes. I can see Tulika Pillai saying, good morning. What fun it is that you are here at our bazaar today. From that one, we move to our next book, which is pretty recent. I think it came to us just last week. Era Investigates the Invisible, written by that wonderful writer Menaka Raman and illustrated by Anjora Norona. What is this one about? Well, what is really the invisible? Well, the invisible in the case of Era are the wonderful, I say, but with a clause or a rider, there are the microbes. There are microbes, good and bad, around us, and Era is a microbiologist, and you can see these illustrations. What are these invisible microbes that she studies? What do microbiologists work on every day, all day? And what they end up, in the book, they tell you about so many things, so many ways in which microbiologists investigate things. They talk about their petri dishes, they talk about their microscopes, they talk about how they analyze these microbes, and find whether they are good microbes or bad microbes. Are they helping us? Are they not working? Are they not helping us? Are they working against us, basically? And you can see, she says there are around 1 trillion species of microbes on our planet. I can see Tulika saying, I know about bacteria and viruses, also about dengue, chikungunya, SARS, and COVID. My amma taught me about this. What a lovely amma you have got, seriously. And, some of these books might just resonate with you because they probably have the information that your amma has told you about, sometimes woven in story form, sometimes as non-fiction. And in this book she says there are around 1 trillion species of microbes on our planet. While each of these microbes looks completely different, they can be broadly classified into bacteria, viruses, fungi, algae, and protozoa. Look at that spread, giving you information on what microbiologists do, what do they analyze, and how do they help make discoveries, or help see patterns that finally find cure for diseases. It's a lovely simple book of telling you about the life on a day, in Ira's life and what she does. Published by Pratham, priced at 55 rupees. We would recommend this one for 6+ year olds, perhaps, maybe even 7, depending on the level at which your children are reading. And while we are on the theme of microbes, a lovely new book that came out maybe a month or so ago, which I think lots of children will enjoy reading and may find very, very relevant in this time. V for Vaccine. Well, what is this one all about? It's been illustrated by Isha Nagar, put together by the HarperCollins team, and I love the subtitle of the book. It says a one shot introduction for to vaccines. Oh, there's Menaka Raman, and she says, thank you so much for showing Ira love. Thank you so much for writing this book, so relevant, so timely. And thank you also for sending it to us much faster than the publishers did. We need to send you at least a virtual hug, Menaka, in these socially distant times. But thank you so much. I think there are going to be many takers for your book from everyone, amongst the people who are watching our bazaar. We will, of course, come back to our V for Vaccine book, and it's a one shot introduction to vaccines. Clever tagline, really. And you know how nicely the book introduces vaccines to our young readers. There are 3 characters, Veni, Vidi, and Vici. And if you know this, you know what those characters mean and stand for. Of course, here they are characters, really, right? And one of them loves sports, one of them loves food, and one of them loves books. But they also like talking about one thing that begins with the letter V: vaccines. What are vaccines? How are they made? Does it hurt to get a vaccine? Really a great simple book, if you can see, very nicely illustrated with bits and bytes of information, and quite quirky bits and bytes of information that gives our young readers a lot of information on the importance of vaccines. What I want to say is that this book was put together in association, or I'm assuming she consulted with them, the one and only Dr. Gagandeep Kang. I can't tell you how much of a superhero she was for many of us during these COVID times. I mean, when she'd come and do these news, offer these segments in the news, like chat with the news channels to say how vaccines are getting developed. So much hope, so much promise, and so much confidence she instilled in us. And I'm delighted to say that she has been, so she's not the author of the book, but she has perhaps consulted with the team from HarperCollins that have put together We for Vaccine. That makes it, for me, like a absolutely verified kind of book, and I think your children will utterly enjoy it. And it also goes back into, it talks to you, like I said, about vaccination, what is our immune system all about, how the first vaccine was created. Lots of us know the story. Perhaps our children, know them as well. The older kids may have studied or learnt or read about Edward Jenner and how he found the vaccine to smallpox. And you can see, this little page on, the origins of vaccination and some cool jokes, because there's a cow. Edward Jenner found from a disease that cows had, he extracted the vaccine for smallpox, putting an end to that scourge that really took away millions of people from us. And this cow on this page says, I give you immunity. Okay, so you can see nice bits of information on vaccines and vaccination in this one. It's a book of nonfiction, very nicely priced at 99 rupees, published by HarperCollins. I can see Sheba Manish here. Good morning. How lovely to see you here this morning at our Pandemic Bazaar. Always, always, you've been supportive of everything Funky Rainbow does, featuring us way, way back, many, many years ago on your site and blog as well. Sheba, how delighted we are that you are here at the bazaar this morning. And I can see you're remarking how clever for the vaccine book. I'm assuming it's the name of the characters that is very, very clever. Yes, I'm not giving that one away, but Veni, Vidi, and Vici. When you read the book, you'll know what those three words mean. Avyukt is saying, oh no, auntie, nice new books. We have to make a list again. No need to say, oh no, you always will make a list after the bazaar, Avyukt and Ameya Nair. Take a look and remember that these books are always with us. So you can make a list at your convenience, but we love it when we get your book orders for sure. And yes, Germ Uncle saying, get your list ready. That's why he's put that up, saying, do not delay, just get your list ready. In keeping with the theme of vaccines, this lovely little book that came to us from Ekalavya, again, a non-fiction comic book called A Germ of an Idea. Very nice. I managed to read it only last week, and it's a book that we would say would work for maybe 7-8+ year olds and adults of all ages. The vaccine one we would recommend for 6+year-olds or 7+year-olds, depending on their reading levels. But this one, perhaps 7+, 8+, maybe. It says microbes, us, and the microbes within us. That's the subtitle of the book, written by Charudatta Navare and illustrated by Reshma Barve. Now, what is this all about? And look at the way the comic it's been done in a really nice, easy peasy style, which tells of the fascinating tale of the interaction between microbes and humans that researchers have been unraveling across centuries. But this one takes you quite ahead in time. It comes to very modern times and, goes into how there are so many microbes within us. When I started, I said there are good bacteria within us, and then bad bacteria, good viruses, bad viruses. This one tracing the origins of, at least from when we have been able to record it in comic, and this one does it in comic format. It traces the fascinating tale of humanity's interaction with microbes. And I love the chapter that, it's divided into different segments. The second segment says, getting in touch with our own microbial selves. In the book, it says you are human, but you have so many more microbial cells in your body than human cells. And, it refers to several doctors, several scientists, old and new, who, are working on how, our relationship with microbes. The book pretty much postulates the fact that how you feel, maybe, it's all to do with the microbes in your gut. and the way you feel, the way you think, the way you do things, they are all influenced by the microbes in your body. Wonderful premise, really, and great research gone into the book in comic form. Wonderful information, which I think really even adults will enjoy very much. Like, look at this section on gut feelings. Now they literally mean how you feel. Maybe you're sad, mad, glad. It has to do with the bacteria in your gut. Priced at 95 rupees. I mean, these books are so wonderfully priced, really, and can easily be on your shelves at not too expensive a price. Published by Ekalavya in association with Parag, an initiative of Tata Trust. This one is priced at 95 rupees. Of course, these were some of the books on viruses and bacteria and microbes that we had. But what has been the impact of COVID-19 on all of us? We have some simple books. I mean, and it has impacted people across the world, across sections of society, across virtually every kind of everyone in the world, wherever they are, whoever they are, whatever they do, young, old, have been impacted by the pandemic. And we have a few books about how that world has changed. I mean, how our world has changed. And but again, like I say, books that hold a lot of hope. Now, the one that I was going to recommend, we did have a couple of copies that just flew off our shelves across the last 2 days. We're getting a couple of more in, and I believe they will be in on Monday. But since we've read the book, I can happily recommend it to you. This one called While We Can't Hug. Do take a look at the cover of this lovely book, While We Can't Hug, which is written by Owen McLaughlin and illustrated by Polly Dunbar. Very rarely do we have foreign books in our bazaar recommendations. We do have a smattering of Western books, and some of them are just utterly and absolutely delightful. But this one we particularly loved because the same team, the author, Owen McLaughlin and Polly Dunbar, had done a book called The Hug, which went viral, if I may use, a euphemism. And when COVID-19 hit, they did this one called While We Can't Hug. And it's such a sweet story about a little hedgehog and a little tortoise. And they are such good friends, but social distancing has come in the way of friendship, and they can't really hug each other physically. What do? Through the book, they have a wonderful friend, an owl, and an owl, a very, very wise owl, as always, who shows them ways in which they can express their love for each other without actually physically hugging. I'm sorry, I don't have the copy to show it up here, but it's going to be with us on Monday or perhaps Tuesday at the latest. But it's a lovely book for our youngest readers. We would say absolutely works for 2+ or even 3+ year olds. A lovely little book on While We Can't Hug. We can, of course, continue to show our love for our friends and family in many different ways. And all of you know, so many of you know, you've celebrated Zoom birthdays, you've done, catch-up calls with your family on different, streaming platforms. We are doing this bazaar over over a platform at the moment. Do we know each other little less, or do we not, do we connect less with each other? Well, given the right space and the right time and the atmosphere, the love still just remains the same. And that's such a lovely book for our youngest readers on what you can do while you cannot hug. It's published by Faber and priced at 499 rupees, available at a discounted price if you use our voucher. Our next book too, and remarkably, again, a wonderful book by a Vietnamese writer called Outside Inside. The author, and it's been written and illustrated by Lien Pham. What a charming picture book this is. I mean, just look at the way, the illustrations in the book are. Again, a book for our youngest readers, we would say 2 3 plus, because just single lines of text on the pages. And what is the story about? On one unremarkable day, everyone all over the world, who was outside had to go inside. Well, almost everyone, because this one, and as you can see in that first spread that I showed you, everyone who's outside, bustling around, going about their everyday work, suddenly has had to go inside. And there's just one kitty cat, sitting on the road right here and looking at what's happened to the world. And this has happened everywhere, to everyone, all over the world. But there were a few people who still had to remain outside. Almost everyone went inside, but a few people had to really remain outside. And look at that. What a wonderful way to introduce the theme of the fact that there were frontline workers working for us, that continue to work, for us through the pandemic. There are sanitation workers. There are people who help keep the wheels of our world turning, who have all remained outside while we have all hunkered in inside. But what have we done when we've been inside? I think, and I love that message in this book, is that sometimes we've cried, sometimes we've laughed, but whatever has happened, we have grown and we have become bigger and better and wiser in many ways. What a wonderful, hopeful book. She's a Caldecott Award winning author. This one is an absolute tribute to the people who've continued to keep our world going while we were all locked inside, and holds so much hope for our youngest readers. We would, like I said, say 2 plus, 3 plus. This one is priced at 450 rupees and published by Penguin Random House. Hello, I can see Shantanu Datta Gupta here. What a pleasure to see you at the bazaar, Shantanu. Thank you for joining us. And there are some surprises coming up, which you may have something to do about, but I'm not giving away anything more. So, I mean, this clutch of books that we're talking about the impact of COVID-19 on our world, and the 2 picture books that I just recommended, absolutely for our youngest readers. While while we can't hug, and outside, inside. There are lovely books in the Indian context as well. In fact, the next book too, which again, I don't have a copy to show, but it's perhaps a really popular one. I know the distributor said they'd have have it with us today. This one is called The Great Realization, and many of you may be familiar with this book, written by Thomas Roberts and illustrated by Nomoko. It was actually a poem that Thomas Roberts performed online for his son, like a bedtime story. And if you actually Google, Google the book, The Great Realization, a video might take, I mean, you may find the video. He's telling the story of the great realization to his son as a bedtime story. It absolutely went viral. It happened last year sometime. I'm thinking, June or July, last year. It absolutely went viral because the story is all about those acts of kindness, heroic efforts of all our key workers that have actually brought us together and kept us together in a time of a huge global crisis. And again, a book that offers you so much hope at the end of it all. I hear there's a sequel coming out to the book. I'm afraid we don't have the sequel yet. I think it's expected this month or perhaps next month. But the huge popularity of this book, The Great Realization, I think spurring Thomas Roberts and Nomoko to do a sequel. Again, it's a book for our youngest readers, and I know we'll have copies of it today. We would say easily, I think his son was 4 or perhaps 5, as he was telling him this, bedtime story, pretty much like a poem, performing it like a poem. It's got rhyming lines, and it's such a wonderful book, that has been loved and received so well across the world for our youngest readers, on how we have learned to live, to come together in the time of a huge global crisis. This one is priced at 499 rupees and published by HarperCollins. We have 2 more books before I say hello to a clutch of friends who've joined us in the Indian context. This wonderful picture book, and a picture book that should go global, I believe, definitely. Jamlo Walks by Samina Mishra and Tariq Aziz, illustrated by Tariq Aziz. We know this, our children know this, that, heartbreakingly, through the lockdown last year, when we were all asked to be locked down and safe at home, hundreds and millions of migrant workers, people who move to different cities in search of work and work in those places. They could be in fields, it could be in farms, it could be in construction, it could be in the building of roads. They come from different parts of the country and they work in different places to earn a living. What happened to them? How could they go home? Their homes were not in the cities that they worked in. And one such migrant worker called Jamlo, Samina Mishra, tells Jamlo's story so movingly. The day the world came still, the streets became empty, schools all shut up, all the schools shut down, and all the work just dried up. And Jamlo was working at that time in a chili field in Andhra Pradesh and in Telangana. And she, like millions of other migrant workers, who heard the word corona being said everywhere, corona, COVID-19, pandemic. I mean, what sense does this, to make to, none of us knew what it was all about. Neither did, all the migrant workers, but there was this hush all over the place, with corona being whispered here, there, everywhere. So when they decided to walk back home, for lack of any form of transportation to take them back to their houses, Jamlo did too. And Jamlo, what did she have with her to carry back? A bag of chilies that were harvested in the field that she was working in. She carries that bag of chilies and decides to start walking. Of course, Samina contrasts young Jamlo's story, with the lives of some other youngsters, one of whom, I think this is Rahul, who had to, get on. Oh, okay, this is Tara, whose Amma is watching the story of the migrant workers on the news channels. And when Tara comes in, Amma quickly switches off the computer and asks her if she can make a dosa. Of course, Samina has a filmmaker's eye. She is a filmmaker. She immediately cuts to Jamlo on the streets, looking at a vendor making dosas, and she knows, even if she doesn't know, we know that she doesn't have the money to buy that dosa. There is kindness, fortunately, in the world, and the vendor gives her some toffees, some laddus, I'm sorry, some tilka laddus from the jar, saying, take them, you'll need them as you're walking. What happens to Jamlo? What a wonderful story it is, so sensitively, so poignantly told. And what a call it is for our to create a more just and equitable world, a world where resources are not just with one set of people, but a more kind, a more gentle, a more just, and a more equitable world. I can see Shantanu saying, great juxtaposition. Really, she's, Samina Mishra, the author, has truly brought her cinematic experience, to the book, making it a wonderful read for our youngest readers. We would recommend it for 6, 7+ year olds. As you can see, there's not maybe 7+ year olds, not a lot of text, but text whose context you need to explain, and which the book does so beautifully. Tariq Aziz's illustration just complementing Samina's words so beautifully. This one's published by Penguin, priced at 250 rupees. One more book that we want to recommend before we say hello is that, again, it's definitely not a book that was written for COVID-19, but this one called Friends Behind Walls. What a lovely one about two children, Inu and Putti, who have been kept away. They're not being allowed to meet. Of course, the context in which Harshika Udasi wrote it is the two friends, arriving. I mean, they are not friends, of course. They go to Deolali for their summer vacation, and they're hoping to make friends with other children in the houses around them. But their parents and their families, their friends and their families, for some reason, just say, no, you cannot play with each other, you cannot meet each other, and they forbid them from doing the things that children normally do. What happens to the kids? Like many of the kids today I'm sure that each one of us has told our children, and if we live in gated communities and apartments, the parks are closed, the public play spaces are closed, and most of our children are just locked inside the house, basically, right? And so, like that, like these children, Inu and Putti in the story, are just completely flabbergasted. And of course, they decide to set things right, and they have decided to find out why their families are forbidding them from meeting each other or playing with each other. And like children always do, they succeed in what they set out to do. You can see that it's a simple, a lovely chapter book, and there is a mystery tucked away inside its pages, and quite relevant to the theme, especially the way the kids are not allowed to play with each other. This one's published by Duckbill and priced at 199 rupees. Let me say, okay, Shantanu is saying, I can see heroes without capes at the back. Absolutely. And I think we're allowed to reveal now, isn't it, that the author of the book, and it's coming up a little later in the bazaar, Dr. D, is none other than the publisher at Scholastic. And there, Shantanu, that's it. The secret is out if it's not out already. We will recommend that book a little, just a little later, Heroes Without Capes, which has been put right up at the back. Really observant publisher at Scholastic, noticing his book right up there. I'm just quickly going to say good morning to a whole bunch of people, and hi to a whole bunch of people who've joined us. Anita Satyajit, Matthew Jacob, thank you for joining us from the UAE. What a pleasure it is to see you at a bazaar, after so many, many months. Rimjim Priyadarshini Tandan. Sorry, Shantanu says, oh dear, I spoiled it. No spoils. Now everybody's going to be after you. And for all of you who, don't know who Dr. D is, you know who the Dr. D of that book is, which is going to come up in our recommendations just shortly. Rimjim Priyadarshini, Just Telling My Tales, Muttamma Devaya, Kavita Mandana, what a pleasure. Priyanka, Bhavin Gala, Adidev Press, Purna D, Divya Menon, Avyukta Nameya Nair, Preeti Ramchandran and Guhan, Tulika Pillai, Priyanka Mishra, Neetu Goel, Menaka Raman, Shiba Manish, Maya Ashwini, Make Magic Happen, Rimi, Kavita Kanmani, Aarti Mutanna Singh, Soul Enriching Stories, and Shantanu Datta Gupta. Thank you so much for joining us at the Pandemic Bazaar. It's been such a pleasure to see all of you here this morning. Our next clutch of books, and we're going to make Shantanu wait just a bit because we are like that only, really, right? Our next set of books is a tough theme. We know that, especially with the second wave in India, many of us, almost all of us, lost dear ones to the pandemic. And the world of Indian children's literature lost so many luminaries to COVID-19. It was just heartbreaking for children who had to grapple with the death of a loved one, of a near and dear one. What are those books that can help them? I know we've recommended through various bazaars so many books on bereavement and children coping with bereavement, but we've picked two today, which are, so relevant in the way that they help young people cope with the loss of a loved one. And the first one that I want to recommend in this is Choo Choo Mantu's Jar of Toffees, written by Aditi Rao and illustrated by the very talented Krishna Bala Shenoy. In fact, I think it's Krishna Bala Shenoy who's done the illustrations for Friends Behind Walls. Indeed, it is a beautiful picture book about this young girl called Preet, I'm sorry, whose uncle and Mantu, Choo Choo Mantu, Mantu means uncle in Konkani, or Mantu in Konkani, he's the center of Preet's world. She is playing games with him every single time. For instance, when they're eating together, she'll say, look, something's happening at the back, and quickly eat away whatever is in Choo Choo Mantu's plate. And these lovely adults who let children get away with this and let them get the pleasure of getting the better of an adult. So you can see Mantu and Preet, what a lovely relationship they share. But Mantu one day just develops a terrible a terrible stomach ache. And of course, before that happens, one day Preet sees him tossing toffees outside the window, and she's wondering what's going on. When she looks out of the window, she sees that there are school children walking by. It's the end of the school day, and when the lunch bell rings, Choo Choo Mantu secretly drops. They don't know, they can't see him. He hides behind a curtain and he drops toffees for the school children as they pass under the window. The children don't know it's Choo Choo Mantu who's doing this. And of course, a little later in the book, he develops this terrible, pain in the stomach, which, they have to rush him to the hospital. And I'm afraid he doesn't come back. How does Preet cope with the grief of losing her favorite uncle? What a beautiful way to make sense of loss, grief, and that one overriding emotion that we need to show our children time and again, of compassion. And compassion just takes little deeds, just small deeds every day that show us that we can be compassionate human beings. Aditi Rao has done such a wonderful job of it in this book. It has an ending which really make warm the cockles of everyone's heart. We would recommend this for 6+ year olds, priced at 55 rupees and published by Pratham. In the same vein, another book for older readers, and we'd recommend this one for 9+ year olds, called When the World Went Dark by Jane D'Souza. Again, a book that came out, fairly, early this year, I think, and written so wonderfully about COVID-19. What is the story all about? Well, it's about a young girl called Swara. She's a fun young girl, but she loses, there's the lockdown is imposed on all of us, and her life just completely changes. Her world changes when the lockdown is imposed on all of us. And what happens in a bit is that she loses her grandmother, so nicely named Pitter Party. And we do love this, Pitter parties who keep chatting, parties or grandmothers who keep chatting about this, that, and the other. And there is this little lovely bit that Swara, that you hear from Swara when party goes off. You left your jokes and funny faces in my mind. You left our secrets and your knitting behind. I'm still sad. I'll always be, but I love you times infinity. You don't mind that I can't rhyme. I don't know how to end this. Will someone help me? What happens? How does Swara come to terms with the loss of her grandmother? If you think it's a sad story, it's not. Jane is such a wonderful humor writer, a humor writer with her heart in the right place. And when Swara tries to grapple with the answers of where her pitter party has gone off and what lies ahead, for her, she unexpectedly stumbles upon a crime, a mystery that needs to be solved, and a mystery that has her delving into the quote unquote Ruth of the matter. I'm not telling you anything about the Ruth of the matter, told really with a lot of humor, with a lot of shine, and more than anything, with a lot of compassion for young children who have lost their loved ones at the pandemic. This is a fantastic mystery, packing in a lot of laughs, but a lot of insights as well on how children can cope with the loss of a loved one. It's a beautiful book. If ever there was one, recommended to all children. If you think your children are reading at an older level, and you can see not that much text on the pages, there are like little illustrations. We would recommend it for 9+ year olds, but if you think they're reading at a higher level, if your 8-year old is reading at a higher level, it would absolutely work as well. Told with the kind of light touch that we love in our books. This one, published by Penguin, is priced at 250 rupees. We do have a clutch of other ones dealing with death. The theme of death, and I'm just going to show you those images because we have recommended them in several bazaars. There's the Amachi Puchi, which is again about bereavement and loss. There's Boo, My Sister, When My Sister Died, published by Pickle Yolk Books, also about a little girl who loses her sister, priced at 350 rupees. Sorry. Oh, yes, 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 yes. And Sham just reminds me, this one created by Richa Jha and Gautam Benegal. We just heartbreakingly lost Gautam Benegal yesterday. We saw a post up on Richa Jha's Facebook page saying that he had a heart attack and passed away. He has collaborated with Richa Jha on so many wonderful books that are in Pickle Yolk's stable. It's such a terrible tragedy that we have lost one more wonderful creator in the Indian kidlit space. Our deepest condolences to Richa, of course, for having lost a co-creator and a collaborator, and to Gautam Benegal's family as well. It's so ironic that it's a book on death that we seem to have picked, at this bazaar, illustrated by someone who's no more himself. Not really no words even to say what I feel when we know that so many of them have just gone away from our lives. But this one too, dealing so sensitively with the theme of loss and bereavement. There is also, for slightly older readers, The Boy with Two Grandfathers, written by Mini Srinivasan, an excellent book about a boy who loses his mother and then has his two grandfathers, coming to look after him. Is it easy? How do children cope? This was, of course, we felt we should introduce a few books on the theme of loss, grief, and bereavement, because so many of us have know of people in our lives who have gone away. And books, as always, really giving us answers to many whys that we can't really get the answers to at all. But from that theme on to a theme of hope. And what is that hope? And the books, the hope that is held for us in the world, primarily by all our frontline workers who have been working tirelessly to rid the world of this pandemic, to cure us, to find vaccines. And in that list, we have the wonderful Dr. D's Heroes Without Capes. The story, of course, he says enigmatically by Dr. D. Now you all know who this Dr. D is, and beautifully illustrated by Tanvi Bhatt. And what is it all about? Well, it's about Earth in 2020. An evil power has taken over the Earth, and somehow there are no superheroes left to save the Earth. But there's always hope, and sometimes we know, I know, that superheroes don't need to have capes, they don't need to be flying up in the sky. They are all around us in different ways. And you can see so beautifully introducing us to different superheroes. And in this one, and there's such clever puns, the names are such clever puns. In this one, the protagonist introducing us to Sushi Mushi, who usually swims around the oceans solving fishy problems. You may wonder why, what problems in the oceans really, but think about it. How is our world interconnected? And is the pandemic a result of the way we've taken our world for granted, really, right? And then there is Pahad Piper. And, like I said, Shantanu using some lovely Desi words, rather, Dr. D using some lovely Desi words to introduce us to unlikely superheroes in our lives. They don't wear capes, but they keep our world happy and healthy and beautiful. And really, it, like, you're seeing the pictures. It's just a few lines of text and bright, vivid illustrations, absolutely working for our youngest readers. We'd recommend it for 4+ year olds. You are better judges of the reading levels of your children, but it's a great one for building empathy, courage, and resilience. This one published by Scholastic, priced at 295 rupees. I can see Muttama saying, splash away amongst the vibrant colors and dance with the angels, Gautam Benegal. Indeed, R.I.P. Gautam Benegal. I hope you're creating a beautiful, colorful world up there with your pictures. So that is about Heroes Without Capes. The next one that we are recommending, and is a book that we love at Funky Rainbow, called From Leeches to Slug Glue, 25 explosive ideas that have made and are making modern medicine, written by that wonderful writer Rupa Pai. She has picked 25 spectacular moments from medical history. They are truly aha moments, which help you wake up to the fact that it's not just one person who discovers or invents something. It's a huge continuum. People have been working across centuries to resolve medical problems. It could be disease, it could be battling, finding cures to disease, it could be discovering a vaccine. It doesn't happen just one day and in 1 hour. It's a giant continuum of work that has made it possible for medical science, for doctors to grapple with all challenges that come our way. Muttama is reminding me that this book was launched by Funky Rainbow, and it was launched at the Museum of Medicine, which is inside a huge hospital and college in Bangalore called the St. John's Medical College and Hospital, one of the country's best known colleges and hospitals. They have a wonderful museum of medicine in their campus, meant for children and for adults, with excellent exhibits down the ages from the early 20th century onwards. They've got posters and little exhibits which many of us don't know about at all. The next time you travel to Bangalore, or for those of you who are in Bangalore, do get in touch with the museum and find out if you can go on a walk. It's just going to open your eyes to the timeline of modern medicine, and how so many aha inventions have been made possible. And our guest today, who will join us a little later in the show, absolutely the man who opened up that museum for us and allowed us to launch this book at the museum, just bringing colliding worlds, like, the intersection between children's books and everything that happens in the world around us. For us, it was indeed an honor to be with Dr. Mario Vaz and Rupa Pai and do that event. What I wanted to specifically mention in this book, one of those instances and one of those aha moments that Rupa writes about so grippingly, is of John Snow's cholera map. In 1854, cholera had wiped out millions of people around the world, and it was John Snow in London. What he said is that, mm, you know, he in his head for the first time came the idea that we need to map where the disease is happening. That's when, way back in 1854, that he gave us a model of mapping a disease. And you all know how much mapping has been done for COVID-19 in the last year and a half, basically, right? But it was John Snow and that fantastic aha moment of making a map of the clusters of London where cholera was spiking. This model, the Rupa has written so excitingly about how Snow stumbled upon that idea, that invention, that discovery, and gave us a map, a disease map. And that's a model that we use even to this day. I mean, how remarkable is that? Like, that's something that happened in 1854 that has helped the world combat disease so much better. So many aha moments like that. We would recommend the book for 10, 11 plus year olds, depending on the level at which your children are reading. It's a book of non-fiction published by Penguin and priced at 299 rupees. We have one wonderful one for adults as well. I mean, it just came into our shelves maybe a week or maybe 10 days ago, and I've just been riffing through it, fascinated by this story of the lady doctors in India. This is a book that we'd recommend for 16, 17 plus year olds and perhaps all adults who are fascinated by medicine. This is the untold stories of India's first women in medicine. And you know what? That pioneering, I've come through half the books, Kavita Rao, the author, talking about Anandi Bai Joshi, who broke caste rules to literally cross an ocean and equip herself with medical knowledge. There's, the story of Rukmabai Raut, who escaped a child marriage and divorced her husband to study and be a doctor. I've read those two stories, but I know that there's also the story of Kadambini Ganguly, who took care of 8 children. She was a child widow. She took care of 8 kids and yet studied to become a doctor. There's also Haimabati Sen, who overcame poverty and hardship to become a medical doctor. It's just lovely. The first two stories that I read telling you about the resilience, the resolute nature of these women to combat societal prejudice of all kinds, and of different kinds. Somebody's family didn't want her to travel abroad. Somebody's family, caste did not allow some people to come forward and join colleges. Some of the doctors in this book, 6, I think she's talking of the stories of 6 doctors, pioneering lady doctors, some of them who've had to combat being widowed, poverty and hardship of the ultimate kind, to emerge as radical women who have taken pioneering steps in the world of medicine. And many of us doctors and women in the world today, we know we walk the path that they created for us. It's a wonderful resource book, actually. And it's, while it's meant for adults, it's written so very well researched and written pretty simply, that I think 16 plus year olds can certainly read this one, and all adults definitely must, at least those with an interest in the history of medicine. This one is priced at 499 rupees. I have just another clutch of books. I know our guest will be in another 10 minutes, but we all know, right? One of the solutions to the COVID-19 problem lies in health, hygiene, physical fitness, and mental fitness as well. So I'm just quickly going to run through a clutch of books on these themes that I think would be relevant to young readers. There is this one, called Supergirls Make a Difference, and it's part of the Supergirls series. You can see it's a clutch of, it's a mix of poems. It's got some stories, it's got some poems, it's got like a piece of fiction. You can see, again, it's a picture book. We would say 6+ or 7+ year olds. Everything in the book is connected to health and hygiene. Why is it important to maintain our health and hygiene? How can we overcome? There are contributions, there are poems written by Kamla Bhasin. There are stories contributed by many well-known writers from the Indian kidlit space, basically, and all about these supergirls. They're a set of 4 girls, and how they ensure that health and hygiene is maintained. As you can see, 6+. There's also, you can see that little bit about the washing of hands, really, right? And little resource things, like little things that little bits and bytes of information on keeping yourself clean, keeping your water clean, that can be wonderful bits of resource information, for our young readers, and also for teachers and librarians. This one is priced at 120 rupees, published by Katha. Sham, can you tell me what the next book is? Is it you? I Love Yoga? I was just a bit confused. Oh, yes, of course, the importance of keeping ourselves fit mentally. I mean, we do have a clutch of books on eating right in the bazaar. I mean, there's something to chew on, there's what's Nima eating today. I mean, these are just aspects of physical and mental well being that I think are so, they help keep our sanity intact in these times. And so we have 3 books on mindfulness, on good health, and really, again, for the youngest of readers, I Love Yoga by Anita Rena Thapan and illustrated by Alankrita. Just a simple book on little yoga postures that you can do at home, written in rhyme, and teaching you about relaxation, concentration, visualization. And if you think this is far removed from children, think again. Look at the way she's comparing nature to different poses of yoga. It's a lovely one about looking around, looking around carefully, listening attentively, and learning to be happy. There's also Tankful of Thankful. Our next book, I'm sorry, that one's published by Tota Books. We would recommend it for 4+ year olds, priced at 250 rupees. There's also Tankful of Thankful, which is all about being thankful for the things that we have in life, gratitude. It is such an important virtue in these times, right? We know we have a lot more than a lot of people out there who don't. And how do we learn to be thankful? How do we imbibe that quality? Again, a little picture book written by Trishila Jain and illustrated by Zach Wideman. You can see, meant for the absolute youngest readers, about a baby train who really wanted to travel far and wide in the world. And you know what that magic fuel is that takes him here, there, everywhere? The magic fuel is gratitude. This one, priced at 350 rupees, really meant for our youngest readers. And there's one more. Title is self-explanatory, called Mental Well-being and Mindfulness. So needed, talking about how to deal with stress and anxiety, talking about how to deal with changes. I mean, you can see it's a simple picture book, and giving you little bits and bytes of information on how to ensure mental well-being and mindfulness. We can't, of course, in the same vein, there is this wonderful book that we recommend. Sham, I want you to put the next one, not the immediate next one, the one after that. in the same vein, and I think this is a book that many of you know of because of how widely it's been publicized on social media and in different on different websites. The Boy, the Mole, the Fox and the Horse by Charlie Mackesy. And it's such a beautiful book, dedicated to love, kindness, and to gratitude, just to all those things that make our world a much more beautiful place. This is easily a book that I'd recommend to all adults, to all children. It's just a keeper. You have got to have it. You can turn the page any day, any time, and you'll find that these pages have so much wisdom in them, because it's a window ultimately into the human heart. It's really a wonderful window into the human heart, and really the world needs this book, Charlie Mackesy's book, more than ever right now. I mean, I think adults will get something. It's akin to a book like The Little Prince, right? Which you, when you read when you're 5, you have one meaning. When you read when you're 10, you get something else out of it. When you read at 20, you get some other meaning out of it, and when you're reading at 50, there is some others of layers and layers of meaning in this wonderful book. It's an excellent gift should you like to give it to anyone, adult or child. And this one is a handsome hardback title published by Penguin Random House, which is a beautiful gift, to yourself, to your children, or to someone special in your life. Do consider picking it up. And we will talk about like the last book in our collection. I know I had a clutch of books that you could read as ebooks as well, and once I finish this one, I'll just quickly run through that one. But this a wonderful young adult book that came out perhaps just a month ago, called Unmasked, which has a spectacular cover, one of the most spectacular covers we've seen in the Indian children's kidlit context. Stories from the pandemic, written by the Sahitya Puraskar award-winning author Paro Anand. The book has been illustrated by Priya Kurian, and we would recommend it for, say, children 11 up years in age. What is it? It takes the year 2020. It's a time when the world absolutely shut down. Many of us fell down, but Paro's stories hold hope so abundantly for readers, maybe like I said, 11, 12 plus year olds who don't feel they don't want to come and ask their parents that many questions, but certainly those questions are buzzing in their head. So what happened when we all fell down? Did we all get up and we brushed our backs off and went on, coming together as as people to get the better of the pandemic? There are multiple stories. There's a mother and a son who are so horribly locked down in the pandemic with absolutely nothing to eat. There's a story in which there's an instance of domestic violence, and there are young people who are who are very clued in with technology. There are some keyboard wizards in one of the stories I remember, who decide to come together and change things, make things better for people who don't have as much. She's picked on so many things that we have experienced in the course of the pandemic, and written such marvelous stories that have been illustrated by beautifully by Priya Kurian. We would certainly recommend this book for 11 plus year olds. I also remember a story about a delivery executive, and how many of us swiggied and dunzoed and ordered things online, whether it was your grocery, whether it was food to eat. And in this story, I remember the delivery executive becomes an unlikely hero. It's a wonderful book, written by one of our foremost writers of children's books, Paro Anand, published by Penguin and priced at 299 rupees. Definitely a must read for all readers 10, 11 years plus. With that, I think we may not have time. I mean, do you have that folder, Sham, where you can just show them the covers of 4 or 5 books that people can read as ebooks, or as some of them are even free on the COVID-19 pandemic. If you're able to access that, it's number 10 onwards. If you're able to access those ones, we'll just quickly. Yes, it starts with the novel coronavirus, which you can read on Storyweaver. The novel coronavirus, We Can Stay Safe. The next one, Annual Haircut Day. Once again, many of you know, Sringeri Srinivas Rao and Annual Haircut Day. Now, this Annual Haircut Day is set in the times of COVID. There's the mystery of the missing soap next. And all these books are available as ebooks. So some of them have to be bought and read online. Some of them can be read online for free. This one from Katha that can be read as an ebook, The Mystery of the Missing Soap. There's the next one, Coronavirus, a book for children about COVID-19, Axel Scheffler's very well-known book that came out early on in the pandemic, which can be read online for free. And there is that wonderful one from Tulika by Zai Whitaker, which you can read as an ebook called Cyrus the Virus. So Cyrus the Virus and his battle to to make the world a better place. Really, what a fun story it is by Zai Whitaker. Can be read as an illustrated by Nilofer Wadia. Can be read as an ebook online. With that, we will move to our guest segment and say hello to our guest of the day, Dr. Mario Vaz. I'm going to just introduce Dr. Mario Vaz to all of you. Like I said, in the course of the program, we met him when we launched From Leeches and Slug Glue, at the museum, at the History of Medicine Museum, which he so lovingly curated to show us how everything in medicine is a huge continuum. It's not one person's discovery or invention that has made aha moments possible in the history of medicine, but it's the continuous work of very many people in different spaces that has made this possible. He is the retired head of physiology from the St. John's Medical College and currently a professor at the International Medical School on the MS Ramaiah Bangalore campus. Welcome, Dr. Vaz. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, 1 second. I'm just going to fix my sound. It seems to be having some trouble. Just hang on a second. Could you just say something, Dr. Vaz, again?
Yeah, thanks very much for having me. Can you hear me?
Yes, very well. Thank you so much. It's absolutely so wonderful that you've agreed to join us. And Muttama, who was watching the show, promptly reminding us about that fun event with Rupa Pai and you at the Museum of Medicine on the St. John's campus. Really, we all want to be back in the real world doing real things sometime soon. So I have a clutch of questions, for you, Dr. Vaz. And, my first one really about COVID-19 marking the return of an old and familiar enemy, or quote unquote enemy, basically viruses. Throughout history, nothing has killed human beings more than just disease, virus or bacteria or parasites that have caused disease. Why are they so difficult to outsmart?
Well, perhaps because they are smarter than we think. After all, viruses, microbes, bacteria have existed for far longer than human beings have. And, if you look at the great Louis Pasteur, who was the proponent of the germ theory, he's reputed to have said that at the end, microbes will have the last say. And I think he was, in a sense, reflecting the fact that while we could learn more about microbes and we could, in his case, even develop vaccines against them, that they are so varied and they are so capable of adapting for their survival that they at the end, yeah, can outsmart us. But I think beyond that, it's also because they're actually very, very small, viruses particularly. And so if you go back to the Spanish flu,
Mm-hmm.
it was a time when the cause of the disease was actually not known. And for one of, the great German scientist Robert Koch, who discovered the causative organism for tuberculosis, Mycobacterium tuberculosis, one of his students was, of course, very active during the Spanish flu and suggested that it was actually a bacteria that caused it. And so people went hunting around for the bacteria, and they occasionally found a bacteria, but it wasn't consistent. So our understanding of disease is constantly changing, and it's we are often consumed by the hubris of our knowledge that we've sort of reached a certain stage in understanding. But if you even look at viruses, there was a time when people attributed certain diseases to viruses only to discover that they were not viruses at all, but new proteins called prions. So, mad cow disease and all that,
Mm-hmm.
which everyone would have heard of. And at the time this theory was put forward, scientists across the world were unwilling to accept this fact. And in fact, the man who suggested the prion theory, a man called Stanley Prusner, when he presented his paper, limericks were written about him, and his students left him because they didn't want to be associated with him. But 10 years later, he was awarded the Nobel Prize. So
Wow.
I think it's got to do with the fact that we need to be humble enough to recognize that there's a lot that we don't know, really.
Lovely, lovely, response there. Actually, right? We do always feel that we're, getting better and better and on top of everything always, but perhaps not. How has the progress? I mean, but still coming back to medical science, how has progress in medicine affected the way that we have responded to pandemics across time, Dr. Vaz?
Well, medicine has certainly allowed us to address some of the great pandemics or even large outbreaks of infectious disease
Mm-hmm.
that occurs in the world. And a big example of that is, of course, vaccination. So we all know vaccination from the story of Edward Jenner, who vaccinated his gardener's son, and and if he had done that today, he would have been probably thrown into prison because he had no business vaccinating his gardener's son. But but vaccination is, I think, one huge progress. It's allowed us to eliminate smallpox. It's allowed us to nearly eliminate polio. And then the other big, and of course, before vaccination was also the idea of variolation, where you could take some of the scrapings out of the fluid of these pustules and then introduce them through the skin. And I mention this because variolation was very widely practiced in India before Jenner. We often think, like the white man's burden, the colonists came here and then made us healthier. But there was a whole quantum of knowledge in India which existed before that. And we had these people who were called tikadars because they used to apply a mark, tika.
Mm-hmm.
And they would go and collect the scabs and the fluid of these people who had suffered from smallpox. They themselves had survived smallpox. And then they went around scraping the skin and introducing this smallpox fluid or the dried scabs. and people were protected from it. And in fact, it was seen as something that the Western world prior to Jenner never knew. And so it was described by Western physicians who came to India. I think the other big advance of medicine is actually treatment. The fact is that pandemics occur, but although we are aware of the mortality, the deaths related to the pandemics, particularly in the present time, the fact that we have so many medications has actually made mortality much less, deaths much less. And so there are some disease outbreaks like the plague, for instance, which can be very effectively treated through certain antibiotics. So I think these are certainly some of the things. If you look at medicine, I think up there is the duty to care. You know, doctors have always been there to care. And so I don't know if you have a picture of the plague physician,
We do
but
have a picture of the plague physician. We'll put that one up. Yeah.
yeah, so that's the plague physician. And in the 14th century, when plague ravaged Europe and nearly 40% or even more of Europe's population died, you had this man, the plague physician, who went around caring for the sick, doing autopsies, all sorts of keeping records of what people did. And if you look at this man, you can actually see, although he looks very different and he's got a beaked leather covering for his face and he's covered from head to foot, well, really, how different is it from the personal protective equipment that we have today? The idea was the same. I think there's also, I don't know if you were able to access the iron lung machines. Yeah.
We'll put that up.
Yeah. Polio was very often fatal. And in the 20th century, there was a huge outbreak of polio in the United States of America. And these instruments called the iron lung, which were nothing but ventilators, were produced en masse. And so you had huge, almost like warehouses where there were so many of these iron lungs, and people were placed in them to survive. Of course, these look crude at this present time, but they were huge advances for their time at that time. And again, I mean, I think the whole eradication of smallpox has surely been one of the triumphs where medicine has actually dealt with pandemics. So medicine has dealt with pandemics, but there's a lot more than medicine that deals with pandemics. I think, and that I'm sure people have thought about and are aware of. Yeah.
What a lovely, fascinating fact about the tikadars. I mean, prior to Edward Jenner, to actually have people who walked around and, like you said, extracted things from scabs and, help people, heal in different ways. It's really a fascinating bit of information, Dr.
Yeah.
Vaz. So are there really any similarities, in the way we have responded to the current pandemic when we compare it to, human responses to the pandemics that have gone before?
Well, actually, what is remarkably similar, and I'm talking about pandemics which have occurred or even as far back as 2,500 years ago, but then repetitively across time. One of the great similarities is the way people respond to pandemics. Because when pandemics occur, the first response is really a response to the unknown until you begin to understand what the pandemic is all about. And so what is almost uniform across pandemics is fear and panic. So if you look at our own pandemic, the whole hoarding of food and of things like that as people rushed to supermarkets. Well, they didn't have supermarkets then, but people hoarded a lot of things because they didn't know how long they'd have to deal with these outbreaks.
Mm-hmm.
I think there are other things which are less savory about pandemics. For instance, the idea of scapegoating,
Oh, yes.
finding people or groups and attributing them as being responsible for the outbreak of disease. Now, we've seen that here in our own pandemic. Early on in the days of the pandemic, we saw that people who looked Oriental. I know in Karnataka there was a man who was driving his motorbike, and he was stopped on the highway, and he was forced to stay outside the town.
Oh,
And
God.
this is because the whole notion of the Chinese where a virus came through, and then everyone who was Oriental, and we know we have a lot of people in India who are from the Northeast, were targeted because they felt people didn't know better. So, this type of scapegoating, or even early on in the pandemic when religious gatherings
Mm-hmm.
occurred, and suddenly people started saying, oh, they are going to spread the virus throughout India. Well, this is not new because in the earlier pandemics, like the Great Plague or the Black Death in Europe, Jews were targeted. There was anti-Semitism was rife in Europe. And so the rumor went around that they poisoned the wells, and so off people went and they rounded up Jews, and many of them were killed in their hundreds and thousands, some with the active support of their rulers, and some despite the fact that their rulers stepped in and said, no, we can't allow this to continue. And this didn't occur just about 500, 700 years ago, but it continued to occur because in the first great wave of the cholera pandemic, which started off in Asia and then moved towards Europe, although it moved at a slow rate, much slower than we know than our current pandemic, in many ways, people waited with bated breath because they could see the pandemic advancing on them year by year. And it was at this time again that the Jews in Europe, this was in the 19th century, were again targeted and they were rounded up and many deaths occurred. So I think scapegoating, the
Mm-hmm.
denial of the existence of the pandemic. When cholera finally crossed the English Channel and it reached England, and the first deaths were reported, the English denied that there were pandemics. That it had reached England's shore at all because they were worried about the economic effects. And by the time they react, well, cholera had reached London, and then it had just burst beyond what was manageable. So I think there are a lot of similarities in the way we've earlier pandemics have evoked reactions, and those reactions continue to be evoked to today. Yeah.
So you say the Jews were targeted, because of the Black Death way back in the 14th or 15th century. Is that right? I mean, why did
Yes.
they
Yes.
go after the Jews specifically for that, doctor?
Well, Europe was always anti-Semitic
Of
because
course.
it was Christian, and
Hmm.
when in an uneducated society, Christians were often brought up to believe that the Jews had killed Christ, and so dating back to that very old sort of view, there were regular outbreaks of violence against the Jews, and an epidemic or a pandemic was only a new trigger for that.
Ah, yes, of course. Sounds so familiar sometimes, right? You could just be talking of something that's happened last year, as recently as last year, here. When we were discussing this theme, you had this very wonderful, saying that even more than the medical world, the role that civil society plays in pandemics, what Can you tell our audience a bit about the role that civil society has played in the pandemics, and are there lessons that we can learn historically from what civil society has done?
Yeah, well, I think when pandemics are, or epidemics are ultimately controlled, uh, the medical profession today may have a prominent part, but individuals in society more so. So in the present pandemic, the very fact that we observe, the norms of social distancing,
Mhm.
masking in public, and all that. These are, as many people have been repeatedly saying, your mask is your first vaccine. So the civil society can play a role in controlling even the current pandemic. But there are examples where civil society has actually played a huge role in mobilizing responses from the medical profession and from industry, so that our responses to a pandemic are more equitable. And a typical example of that is, for instance, the example of HIV/AIDS. Now, in the midst of these sudden outbreaks, some of us don't even think of HIV/AIDS as a pandemic at all, but
True.
it's killed about 35 million people, and
Mhm.
it's spread to every country in the world. And in the early days of the HIV/AIDS pandemic, there was, of course, a huge stigma associated with HIV/AIDS, primarily because it was seen as a gay disease.
Right.
And in fact, one of the earlier terms used for HIV/AIDS was GRID, or gay-related immune deficiency.
Oh my God.
And so long as people, thought of it as a problem only of a specific group or gaze, uh, the vast majority of people actually felt it had nothing to do with them. And many people at the time, fed on their prejudices and their self-righteousness, and even suggested that, well, what was happening was a good thing because that was immoral behavior.
Oh
But of
gosh.
course, HIV/AIDS spread, and it spread through blood, and hemophiliacs who got the disease because they were getting regular blood transfusions. And people, it spread by heterosexual means. And so when the disease finally spread and came into the homes of people who thought that their home was sacrosanct, and HIV/AIDS would always be outside their doors, you found that civil society suddenly awakened to the fact that there was a disease out there, and it affected each one of them. They started seeing people whom they knew, their relatives, dying of HIV/AIDS. And this was a time when the drugs that were developed by industry cost a huge amount, to the extent that it was almost a death sentence for anyone outside the rich countries. But even in the rich countries, because in the early days this was not covered by insurance or any other means, it was only the rich within the rich countries who could afford these drugs. And that's where civil society movements came to the fore, because there
Right.
was this huge anger at industry trying to make profits out of the misery and deaths of human beings. And this huge civil society movement worked, because in time, pharma and the industry had to actually give way. Formulations were shared. The generic medicine industry, and you know that India is a huge site for generic medicines,
Yes, yes.
had a huge role to play to ensure that these were disseminated across the world, and treatment became more equitable. And I think that was a huge example of how civil society could work. And civil society continues to work today, because it's fighting for the pricing of diagnostics. It's fighting for the equitable distribution of vaccines across the globe, because right now we know that the rich countries of the world have stocked vaccines to the extent that they have 2 to 3 times their requirements,
Yes.
while there's a large part of the world which, unlike India, which has the manufacturing base and can therefore provide vaccines to ourselves, don't have that, and therefore are just waiting for vaccines, and they don't know when that would come. So civil society has a huge role to play. Yeah.
Such a insightful response that is, Dr. Vaz. I mean, prior to this discussion, you'd think that all the achievements go to the doctors, to the frontline workers, but to say that it's people who've mobilized more equitable medication, medicines being available at more affordable prices is, really a wonderful, eye opener into the role that civil society can play in the times of these, in pandemic times, really. uh, what do you think we can learn from the aftermath of earlier pandemics, Dr. Vaz? And many of the people, and I can see comments going up saying this is such a much needed session, says Jane D'Souza, Gopal Krishnan, there's Sumana Kundagrami, who I think is also a doctor, saying that it's really an enlightening conversation with you. Many of them teachers and librarians who are watching, who would like to know what we can do to keep our children and ourselves safe, through the COVID-19 pandemic. So do tell us about the lessons that we can learn from the aftermaths of pandemics, first, and then go
Well,
into the COVID-19
yeah.
one.
Well, I think one of the things that I definitely like to say is that pandemics are more than just about viruses, and it's more than just about the medical world trying to respond, or all of us putting together our collective innovative ideas to work. I think what we have learned from pandemics in the past, and certainly pandemics that will come in the future,
Mm-hmm.
is that they are very often the response to man's or humankind's destruction of our planet and our relationship with our environment. So I know that the jury is still out on the COVID pandemic, and there will be a lot of theories about, did it actually spill over from an animal into humans, or was it a laboratory accident? And I don't think we can reach a conclusion at this stage about that. Uh, and there are compelling arguments for both. But what is very clear is that as we begin to destroy the animal habitats, the environments around us, we are going to get into closer encounters with species that we did not originally encounter.
Mm-hmm.
In the past, human animal interactions were really largely seen in terms of large animals like, elephants coming and destroying sugarcane fields, or tigers coming out of their habitat and then becoming man eaters. But of course, these viruses and these small microbes are the hidden elements of our interactions with the environment. And HIV is believed to have jumped from chimpanzees to humans.
Mm-hmm.
And there are many examples, because a lot of the diseases that we suffer from have actually started off as zoonotic diseases which came about when we domesticated animals and
Right.
brought them to live with us. And even if we do not look at it purely as an issue of viruses, or jumping from animals to humans, I think that a huge lesson has to be that unless we preserve our planet and start avoiding things like climate change, working towards these big changes in climate, we are going to face these changing disease patterns where outbreaks of infectious disease are going to occur where they were never seen before. Malaria, I mean, I grew up in a hill station 7,000 feet above sea level, and we never thought of mosquitoes. And we always hated coming down to the plains because we'd be constantly buzzed by these mosquitoes. But as the planet warms, if we do nothing about it, we're going to see areas which never saw mosquitoes seeing mosquitoes. And we're going to see these insect vectors transmitting diseases in areas that never were complete, was shielded from these diseases. So I think the lessons have to be that we have to look beyond just the immediate cause to the way in which we live and the way in which we interact with our environments. And at the end of the day, the ways in which we can keep safe, at least at a personal level, have really not changed over a long period of time.
Yes.
So if you look at the Spanish flu, for instance, people realize the value of masking. And yes, they didn't have the N95 masks and the things, but there they were protecting themselves from whatever it was out there which was causing the disease. And isolation and quarantine is not a new phenomenon. So if you look at the Great Plague, for instance, there's the story of the Tartars having laid siege to a town in the Black Sea called Kaffa. And at some stage, they started witnessing deaths among the army. And they realized that this was terrible because deaths were spreading so fast. So they resorted to catapulting the dead bodies into the city that they were besieging. And many people look at this as an example of bio-warfare. Now, actually, what happened was they were probably protecting themselves. They had to finally flee, and so the siege was lifted. But the people inside the city were also subjected to this, and they fled to their boats and went back to Italy. It was a Genoese city, and they carried with them the plague. So quarantine and isolation and masking and the social distancing are not new phenomenon. They are phenomenon which have existed for long periods of time, and very often and well before the understanding of germs. So even if you look at that plague physician which you showed the picture of, why would the plague physician actually cover himself from head to toe? Well, they were just scared. They had in the beak herbs because they felt the sweet-smelling herbs would dissipate anything from the air which was causing the disease. But they carried a stick so that they wouldn't get too close to patients, and they would lift the clothes and examine them. And there was something perhaps intuitively telling them, don't get too close.
Wow.
Of course, the tragedy of this costume is that they were covered from head to toe, but they wore felt shoes and light socks, and it was probably through that the fleas bit. So they were protected to some extent, but without the knowledge of how disease was being transmitted, they were still susceptible. So I think we do learn a lot from the past. And I think the good thing is that we know that pandemics come and pandemics do go. They go through their waves, and then ultimately we develop our immunity, and that is hastened today because of the vaccination. So I think a big message is to go out and get vaccinated. Keep checking to see when vaccines are available for your children. It's not only about what studies are being done, but they have to be approved by our regulatory bodies. But keep looking at that, because I think that's a good thing to keep doing. And in the interim, just keep listening to the common sense advice that we are being told. Cover your faces, mask up, socially distance, look at hygiene. A lot of stories. I know we're running out of time, so I'll stop They're wonderful stories about hygiene and medicine. Doctors weren't always very hygienic, but that's another story.
That is just, I mean, we could chat with you for the next half hour. I can see so many comments going up. Thank you so much for this much needed session, Dr. Vaz. Really grateful. Matthew Jacob, who watches from the Middle East, says, such a brilliant chat. Thanks, Dr. Vaz. Imagine the wealth of knowledge gained by children and even adults watching the show today. Well done, Team Funky Rainbow. David Williams from Australia saying, these days it's rare to see an interview where the interviewee simply gets to speak and actually finish their ideas. This was just fascinating. My gosh, so many wonderful stories and so much to be learned from the history of pandemics. I really wish, the world goes back to normal at some point and we can do a real session with you, Dr. Vaz, for all the adults and children watching on really, how much we can learn from medical history. You are a treasure trove of information, and we are just totally thankful. We always have guests from the world of writing, from literature. We know you love books, of course, but most of our guests are writers and illustrators and editors of children's books. It was a pleasure listening to you today. I can call out so many more comments. Sumi Chandrasekharan saying it was just fascinating listening to you. Shiba Manish saying Dr. Vaz is a storyteller par excellence. Thank you so much. Really,
Well,
what a pleasure to have you
before
here.
you continue, Vidya, I just want to tell you thank you very much for having me here because I really enjoyed
Yes,
talking to you and
thank
yes,
you.
for whatever it's worth, I'm fascinated by the past as well. So
Lots to learn from our past. Thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Vaz. It's been a
thank
pleasure
you very
really
much.
listening. Yeah. Bye bye.
Thank you. Okay.
Bye. Thank you so much to all of you watching. I can see Sunila saying, thank you so much, Team Funky Rainbow. Brilliant session. Loved hearing the history of different pandemics. I'm just going to say, hello to all our friends and show you just 3 or 4 new arrivals before we sign off. I know we've taken a bit more time, but we could have been talking to Dr. Vaz for another hour, listening just riveted. I'm going to just quickly show you a clutch of new arrivals that have come into our shelves. Shama, you're going to just put out the new arrivals announce. We have 3 or 4 new books that are on our shelves, that have come into our shelves recently, and I'll let Sham show that poster. Shiba Manish saying, thank you, Team Funky Rainbow. Vidya, what a wonderful host you are. My gosh, what a lovely audience all of you are making us do these, lovely interviews with so many informed people. Just quickly, and many of these books we haven't read yet. There's the Puffin Book of Funny Stories, which promises a lot of laughs across the weekend. There is Best Classic Short Stories for Children, which is a handsome edition, and this is like classic stories from different meant for this decade, introducing us to different writers from Chekhov to Bram Stoker to Charlotte Bronte to Nesbitt to Louisa May Alcott and a whole host of other writers, very, very handsomely produced. The Puffin Book of Funny Stories, of course, brought out by Penguin, and this one by HarperCollins Children's Books. There's Supriya Kelkar's much talked about new book, the author of Ahimsa, with Strong as Fire and Fierce as Flame, which we're going to read across this weekend. But this one published by Scholastic, priced at 395 rupees. And there's this one which I've already read, but which should reach all your shelves. We had Payal Dhar as a guest at our bazaar 2 weeks ago, and this is her wonderful new book, It Has No Name. Just love the cover of it, and it's a fantastic story about a teenager and a coming of age story of a teenager, of a gay teen in modern India. you did listen into Pyle's conversation with Tamanna, with a young teenager Tamanna Kaveri Sen, and this book I say must go into every house that's looking for coming of age stories for their young readers. We would recommend it for 11, 12 plus year olds, definitely, let's say 12 plus year olds primarily, but a wonderful book from Red Panda, priced at 399 rupees. Quickly going to say hi and bye to a bunch of people: the Drawing Den, Vicky Kashyap, Tickling Tailbone, Shweta Sharan, Aarti and Mamta, Tanisha Reddy, Karthi, Vachana Shetty, Shweta Kolachana, Eureka Children's Books. What a pleasure to have you here, Swati and Venki, Anjani Rajgopal, Jane D'Souza, Tejal Parulekar, Sumana Kundagrami. How nice that you joined us all the way from Calcutta. Mirunalini, Vidhi Bhargava. Lovely to have the editor of Red Panda here with us, Sunila Kulkarni Gupte, David Williams, Sumi Chandrasekharan, Anu's I can't get Anusha, sorry. Anusha Velusamy. Anusha Velusamy. Thank you so much for, watching this bazaar on pandemic books. It's just such a pleasure to present books to all of you week after week, because like I've always said, it gives us new eyes to see our own books with. This conversation with Dr. Vaz giving us so many insights into the pandemic. Folks, have a reading sort of weekend, because really no better source of information, no better way to allay our fears, no better way to know that we can overcome than by reading books. We'll see you next week with another theme. Till then, stay masked, stay safe, stay reading, and be happy. Bye bye.